Hello, and welcome to another edition of Humble Theology. My name is John, and in this particular series, we are looking at the doctrine of assurance. How do you know that you're saved? And in this episode, especially or specifically when you're up against trials, it seems like the world's grown cold, or God has left you, or abandoned you, or things like that. There's just trouble all around you, things that shake our security. We don't feel as basically comfortable as we normally would because things are going wrong in life. Lost a job, a relationship fell apart, something to that nature. And those things shake us to our core, and we want to cry out, why? Or why me? Or what's going on? We want answers. And so that happens in trials, and sometimes those will get so bad that we'll consider, maybe I'm not a Christian, maybe I'm not saved, because if I were a child of God, why would this be happening to me? And that's not exactly the right frame of mind we're supposed to have. Sure, those are the things we want to know, and that points us to the direction of a very important book of the Bible, Job. He suffers greatly, and he doesn't know why. We're told why and what's going on behind the scenes, but Job is not. These things afflict him, first his family, wealth, property, and then even later his health. And yet in all these things he will not curse God and die, as his wife suggests for him to do. Just get it over with. Just go ahead and offend God. So, in cursing him, he'll just kill you. It'll be over quickly. Why prolong this? So, well, we know that's not the right attitude to have either. But how do we look at suffering? How do you look at your life when things are going poorly and your assurance? Well, in assurance, again, we're trying to reflect on my salvation. How am I linked? What is my unity to Christ here? And that's what Job helps us sort out, is that as we're considering suffering and that we want to know why or what's going on, or am I saved because why is this happening to me? It's exactly those things that are happening to us that need to drive us closer to Christ. In Peter's books, suffering is part of the Christian life. Well, why? Because he suffered, and Jesus suffered. And so when we look at identifying with him, well, we identify with his suffering in this life as well. Doesn't mean it's going to be total suffering, but there are going to be those times. And we can say, oh, okay, well then instead of this shakes me, then I should be a little more grounded in my suffering. Now, we can't manufacture it. So in other words, when you look at suffering for Christ's sake, suffering for righteousness, some people manufacture that. And what I mean by that is your typical Jehovah's Witness or Mormons. They come and knock door to door, and if you don't invite them in, and they get, in a sense, they would say rejected, well, they're like, oh, look, we're facing persecution for Christ's sake. And they're manufacturing that sense of trial, persecution, and they're using that to say, well, look, we're assured of our salvation because you guys tell us no all the time, or you won't open your door to us, and things like that. Then another false way of when we're suffering is when we're suffering for our actual own sins. We can't really say, well, I'm suffering for righteousness' sake. If you're arrested for stealing a car, there's nothing righteous about that. You committed a crime, you've been arrested, you're going to face, persecution for that from the justice system, and probably in prison and all those other kinds of things. So when we say we're suffering trials, persecution as a Christian, things like that, that's when we're attacked for our beliefs, for our Christian values, and then sometimes suffering just in general in this life. And again, we won't always have the why. We won't always be told the reasons behind what's going on. And again, that points us back to the book of Job. And it's not really a book about Job, it's really a book about God. Because we get the behind the scenes of what God is doing, saying, and providentially overseeing behind the scenes. As all these things are going on with Job, he gets more and more frustrated with his friends because they keep ringing the same bell over and over again. That's like, well, only, the only people that are really supposed to suffer are those who have done wrong. You should just admit your fault and you can get over this. And Job's like, I've done nothing wrong, and I call my creator to witness basically for me. What have I done? What have I done? And the interesting thing is that through all this, we like to think in terms of, picturing Job sitting there in his ash pile with his friends for, the first week, they're nice and quiet. And then when they start to speak up all these challenges, we view that interaction there. Well, but God's present there too. He's listening. He's part of the group. He's part of the people or persons, I guess you could say, they're listening to this conversation. And he finally has a speech at the end as well. He interrupts all these different people talking, and Job and his friends. And he calls basically Job into almost like a wrestling confrontation. Let's wrestle. Let's have a debate of questions of your knowledge. Gird yourself up and answer me these things. And he goes through a whole series of questions that Job cannot possibly answer. And what's going on here? Well, God is saying, I am providentially over all things. And if we're to trust him with everything else, because we don't know how rain falls in the storage of ice and all these kinds of things that Job has asked, we don't know those things either. We don't know how they were done. We don't know the measurements that God used to design the earth and all those kinds of things. We trust him providentially with everything from creation to salvation, in that whatever is going on, our frame of mind needs to be kind of like Job. I'll shut my mouth before God. I won't accuse him of anything. I won't doubt my own salvation either. I'll trust God through the circumstances that he knows what he's doing. And as scripture tells us, he's doing it ultimately for my good. Whether in life or in death, whatever that ends up being, that's for my good and his glory. This isn't about me. This life is about him. It's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And so we need to see ourselves in that type of Romans 12 through it's like 16 about being a living sacrifice. What are you so upset about? God is the one who's in control. God is working on something here. You can't possibly understand the intricacies of providence of everything that's going on in your life, that you're begging for comfort, that God is trying to use to basically do something else. Again, for our good, his righteousness, not necessarily our individual good, maybe the good of the church or your community or someone you'll help later down the road. But as we say, God is present in this conversation with Job as his friend. We also need to understand that as we say God is present, that means Jesus is present. Jesus can answer every single one of those questions that God asked Job. And yet Jesus has to suffer the loss of everything, even his life. Job is spared of his life, and he returns everything God unto him, several folds, several times over. We see the same reflection in Jesus. Here he is, the crown prince, son of God, glory, all this stuff, and he leaves that behind to suffer in our place to the point of death, facing the justice and judgment of God on our behalf, to be restored afterwards as well. So we need to see that. We need to see how our lives can be a living sacrifice for God, and that as these things happen in life, yes, they'll hurt. They'll be painful, emotionally painful, physically painful, all kinds of things. But we need to stop, stand back, and say, this doesn't shake my assurance. I don't think less of being saved, but I do need to have the right frame of mind to say, as being saved, I need to trust my Redeemer, that He is doing everything to work out the good of His people and the glory of His name. That's it for this lesson. Ran a little long, 10 minutes, but I hope it was a blessing unto you. I think this is my last lesson on assurance. But again, if there's more questions, more comments, leave them below and we'll address those in future videos as well. I thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. God bless and take care. Bye-bye.